called Abroad Abroad. When I was 19, I studied abroad in England for 6 months. It was the first time I had ever left the United States, and I was extremely excited to venture out on my own. I didn't know anyone, I was going to be more independent, and I was sure that this was when I'd start to feel like an adult. Although, to be honest, my decision to study abroad was somewhat less adult-like and more spur-of-the-moment life-altering decision. I had originally wanted to study abroad in Rome, but that would have cost an extra $10,000 that I, of course, did not have at my disposal. However, going to England would allow a direct tuition transfer, and I already spoke the language. I selected the University of Essex from the list of school options because it sounded the most British. This was literally my thought process. The university was located in Colchester, a place I'd never heard of before, but I later learned was the site of the annihilation of Roman troops at the hands of Boudica, the red-headed queen of the British Iceni tribe. Around the year 60 AD-ish, the occupying Romans were hanging out in the area and doing what many occupying forces do, raping, pillaging, and general dickery. The Romans flogged and raped Boudica's 2 daughters, and she later cited this as her incentive for what happened next. Fed up with the Roman shenanigans, the Iceni rallied with a couple of nearby tribes, and they chose Boudica as their leader. Under the queen's leadership, the allied British tribes, approximately 30,000 troops in all, besieged the Romans and methodically destroyed the city. Further Roman troops were dispatched to assist their countrymen, but they were overwhelmingly annihilated as well, because fuck you, Rome, that's why. The pièce de résistance came when Boudica had the Roman troops trapped in a temple in Colchester. She took a moment and weighed her options as to what to do with the Romans. Should she try and starve them out? Flood the temple? No, she decided to burn it the fuck down. Afterwards, she went on to destroy Romans in modern-day London as well as St. Albans and killed an estimated total of 80,000 Romans. It's true the Romans eventually defeated the Britons, but the focus of Boudica's uprising is and will continue to be when she torched a temple full of soldiers for messing with her family. Well, that and her red hair. For some reason, everyone is really hung up on her being a redhead. With that in mind, I was excited to head to Essex. I later learned that the current stereotype of the area is more Jersey Shore and less badass warrior queen, but I suppose that's neither here nor there. When I was preparing to go to the University of Essex, I knew I'd have to navigate from Heathrow Airport in London to the school on my own. Nowadays, the university offers a shuttle service for international students, but when I was there, I was only given a vague address and some plucky optimism from the international office that I'd surely figure it out. I suppose they assumed that I was an adult for fuck's sake and should be able to figure out how to get from point A to point B without any hand-holding. This would be a reasonable assumption, except I didn't expect to contract food poisoning on my flight to London. When I disembarked my plane, I realized that I had no idea how to get myself, along with my very heavy luggage, to the university, all while vomiting into every trash can I passed. I did not do much to improve the world's view of Americans on my first day abroad. I later learned that there is a bus that goes directly from Heathrow Airport to the university, but on that first day, I learned 4 other very important lessons instead. 1. If you are female and vomiting in public, everyone is convinced you are pregnant. Even after you explain that you are still a virgin, everyone assumes you're a lying whore. 2. British public transportation employees are incredibly kind to sick American girls and will offer to let you nap in their office for an hour if you look like death. 3. Train doors do not care if you are sick and attempting to collect multiple heavy pieces of luggage. If you don't get your ass off the train in the 5-second window allotted for disembarkation, you are going to the next station whether you like it or not. 4. Although I would never, ever encourage anyone else to do what I did, there is a 1 in a billion chance that an incredibly kind stranger will drive you to campus, help you check in with the international office, and carry your bags up to your room just to make sure you're okay without raping you. After taking multiple trains crisscrossing all over London, I finally found myself on the correct train to Colchester. I did my best not to vomit on that final train, although I don't know why. I'd vomited into trash cans and pilfered air sickness bags on all the other trains I'd taken that day. When the train pulled into the Colchester station, I stood to collect my luggage, which was no easy feat, with a giant suitcase that could have held multiple dead bodies, a full-size backpack, and a laptop bag. I didn't move very quickly and learned that the train does not give a crap if you didn't get off in time. It's going to go if you're ready or not. As such, I was forced to continue on to the next town. This time, I was prepared for the doors and nearly fell out because the food poisoning had left me dehydrated, weak, and somewhat delirious on top of being weighted down by extremely heavy bags. At the train station, I was unprepared for the fact that apparently England is not super handicap accessible and there was no elevator in sight. Just a million tiny stairs that were begging me to trip on them as I went down and then up again, traveling underneath the actual station. Did I mention it had been raining and the stairs were wet? Because it was raining and the stairs were wet. As I was struggling with my luggage, a man in his late 20s or so offered to help me with my luggage on the stairs. I gratefully accepted, and once we were up on the other side, he asked where I was headed. I told him, and he started to offer me his phone to call a cab, but then stopped and asked if I just wanted a ride. I was so exhausted and drained that I accepted. He set me up on a bench with my luggage while he went to go get his car. While I waited, it occurred to me that this is how white girls like me end up on Nancy Grace. But I was so spent that I just said screw it and decided to go with it. Do not do this. When he pulled his car up to the curb, the first thing I noticed was the car seat in the back. It occurs to me now that it's not like you have to go through some sort of screening process or take a good guy test before purchasing a car seat. You just have to have cash. But again, he didn't seem creepy, and I was so worn out from the trail of vomit I'd left all over London, so I accepted his offer to load my luggage in the trunk and nearly sat in the driver's seat by mistake. Ordinarily, I remember that the driver's side is on the right, the opposite of America, but again, I was not thinking. As we drove, the guy, whose name I have since forgotten, told me about how he'd recently really gotten into the TV show My Name is Earl. He was really intrigued by the idea of good karma and paying it forward, so he was excited to be able to help me. The drive was short, and we soon arrived on campus. I had expected him to simply drop me off with my stuff, but he insisted on carrying my bags for me as we found the office for international students so I could pick up my key. He then went above and beyond and insisted on helping me take my luggage up to my flat on campus. Again, do not do this. Once I was safely inside, he wished me well and gave me his email address, asking me to send him an email in about a week to make sure I was doing all right. A week later, I did as he requested and sent him a message. I wanted to do something for him to show my gratitude, but he insisted I not worry about it. He was just happy to improve his karma. He wished me an enjoyable time in England, and that was it. As I've said about a dozen times already, under no circumstances should you accept a ride from a strange man in a foreign country, let alone allow him to see where you're staying. That's literally the premise to Taken. But I appreciate that act of kindness all the same, most likely because it feels like somewhat of a novelty to me. Perhaps I'm just a little jaded, but 9 years later, I'm still in awe of that man's eagerness to help a gross, jet-lagged, food-poisoned American simply because he loved the show My Name is Earl and wanted to improve his karma. I think a big part of it, though, boils down to how this event seemed to set the tone for my entire time in England. By breaking down my own perceptions and stripping away the image I'd cultivated, I was exposed and felt like I was able to start over because, frankly, when you're vomiting into a trash can in a London Underground station, there's nowhere to go but up. Before I left for England, I was a part of a community in which I felt like I was under a lot of pressure to be the quintessential good girl. I don't know if this is actually true or if it was just my own perceptions of the kind of person I should be, but either way, it's how I felt. And I don't say this to mean that there's anything wrong with expectations to be the best person you can be. I feel like I want to be a better person than I was yesterday, and tomorrow I hope I'm better than I am today. But at times I felt like I was trying to be who others expected me to be without really having any idea of who I was. One of the bars on campus hosted weekly themed fancy dress, also known as costumes, parties, and one of the first events had the theme of saints and sinners. In the past, I would have automatically gravitated towards the saints aspect of the theme. At one point, I'd even considered becoming a nun, an aspiration that now seems hilarious to some of my friends, especially when my hot pink hair, tattoos, and stretched ears are considered. But for this party at this school in this country where no one had any expectations of who I was or who I was expected to be, I decided to go the sinner's route. I prepared to head down to the party with some of my flatmates, and I made a comment to one of them about how it felt kind of weird to go as a sinner. My flatmate looked at me somewhat confused and said, "I never would have pegged you as a saint." She didn't say it unkindly, just surprised. I thought about that for a moment, and I briefly considered that only a few weeks earlier this might have offended me. Instead, I wondered if maybe I really would fit in better on the sinner side. At the very least, maybe I'd be able to find some sort of gray area in the middle that made sense to me. I learned a lot about myself when I was abroad. I collected many stories and experiences while I was there, a lot of them involve alcohol, and I left parts of me behind, all for the better. I met people that changed me in really profound ways, from my name is Earl Good Samaritan from my first day, to new friends, to the incredibly kind English guy I dated. I think my most important takeaway from my time in England was the way I tried to really let myself be open to whatever was available to me. I find that as I get older, I approach so many things with more trepidation and reservation than I did nearly a decade ago. But I suppose that's one of the beautiful things about being 19. There was a feeling of being infinite, like you could do or be anything. It was that openness, that willingness to try rock climbing, Greek dancing, a last-minute flight to Rome because it was only 30 euros, which led me to have these amazing moments. Did I forget to pack an umbrella and get soaked to the bone in Rome on my last-minute trip? Do I look like a drowned rat in every photo from that weekend? You're goddamn right, I did and I do. But I also remember the tiny pizza place that my friends and I found somewhere near the Colosseum. On the outside, it wasn't necessarily anything special, and there's no way I'd be able to find it on a map if I tried. But inside were some of the nicest people I met in Rome. My friends and I didn't speak any Italian, and we had to order our food with lots of pointing and gesturing with our hands to show how much we wanted. After we managed to communicate through our pathetic attempts at sign language, we paid for our food and were in the midst of enjoying it at a small table when the lady behind the counter came over and gave us a small plate of cookies. When we reached for our wallets to pay her, she stopped us, smiled, and returned to the counter. Maybe she appreciated that we didn't try to just shout at her in English to order, or maybe she felt sorry that we were soaking wet from the rain, or maybe she was just a nice person. But I know I never would have experienced something as sweet and warming on a cold, wet day as a small plate of cookies if I hadn't said yes to this last-minute trip. As I'm writing about and reflecting on my time abroad, I'm realizing exactly how cynical I've become. The mantras of nothing is free and everybody wants something have been drilled into my head over time, and that's really sad. I probably watched way too many episodes of Survivor, but I find myself feeling very paranoid or suspecting people of always having ulterior motives. It's possible for people to be nice for the sake of being nice, and while I don't want to be naive, I don't want to be so jaded either. If I do something nice for someone, I don't do it with the expectation of getting something in return, so I don't know why I assume other people would. Is it possible I could be taken advantage of with this attitude? Possibly, but I don't think I'll ever regret being kind to someone. If someone tries to take advantage of my kindness to serve themselves, that's really on them and not me. I think my Good Samaritan from my first day in England had the right idea. Regardless of personal, spiritual, or religious beliefs, maybe we should all be trying to do good deeds just for the sake of doing them. This guy was so excited to help out another human being simply because he could. I once had a friend argue that good deeds are inherently selfish because we like the way we feel when we help others, making no selfless act truly selfless. At the time, that sentiment depressed me, but now, I wonder if it even matters. What's so wrong with feeling good about helping another person? Shouldn't we all want to feel good? Why should that be a feeling reserved only for others and not ourselves? I spent so much time putting pressure on myself to be a certain way, and I ended up mentally beating myself up for years. I've come to the conclusion that there really isn't anything wrong with wanting to be happy, and if I reach that goal by making someone else happy, then all I've done is double the amount of happiness in the room. There seems to be a cultural stigma against happy adults. We're supposed to work hard, pay our bills, and happiness is incidental. Sure, it's a bonus if you like what you do, but work is paramount. If someone decides to pursue a less lucrative path that makes them happier, there's a social stigma surrounding that decision. Of course, there are the supportive people, but it seems like for every supportive person, there are 10 naysayers who are quick to remind you that following a conventional path is much safer. When I really decided to pursue writing, I heard the full gamut of negative comments that mostly boiled down to reminding me what a difficult field it is and how I'd probably end up as a penniless hobo who would starve to death in a cardboard box. Of course, once my first book was accepted for publication, suddenly my desired career path was somewhat validated for others, but people did, and still sometimes do, ask when I'm going to get a real job. I think this shift happens around the time people start expecting us to act like adults. As kids, we're encouraged to play and be happy and explore our interests. But as soon as people think we should be grown-ups, we're expected to get serious and pick a real career. Happiness is suddenly shoved to the back and is treated like a luxury rather than a goal to be encouraged. But what if we actually open ourselves up to what makes us happy? I'm not saying we all have to be astronauts or ballerinas or whatever else we wanted to be when we were 5, but maybe we'd have more people spending time at observatories or taking a dance class for fun. And if it turns out that you hate space or you really don't like dancing, at least you tried it and learned a little bit about yourself. It wouldn't hurt for some of us to revisit some of the optimism of our younger selves and embrace some spontaneity to take advantage of opportunities as they present themselves. I decided to study abroad on a whim simply because I could, and it changed me for the better. But it doesn't even have to be as big as leaving the continent. Maybe you try a free yoga class or go to happy hour with your coworkers once. Hell, buy a new hat you're not sure you can pull off and wear it anyway. It really doesn't matter what you do as long as you do something. Because I think part of being an adult is being brave enough to open yourself up to new opportunities and embracing your own happiness. But if your opportunity is to try airline food, be forewarned that it could result in lots of vomit and an entire crew of flight attendants trying to convince you that you're pregnant. On the bright side, it could turn into an amusing travel anecdote and a chance to embrace the lesson that maybe you should just pack your own sandwiches next time. Thank you. And I have one more short piece I want to read for you guys. Also in this book, in addition to the essays, I've included some kind of instruction sheets for how to get through various situations like an adult. So I have like how to open a greeting card, how to go grocery shopping, how to make a phone call. So this is how to adult running into someone at the grocery store. 1, notice someone you know in your peripheral vision. Pretend to be completely engrossed in the bread selection as if you're weighing the comparative merits of whole wheat versus multigrain. Wonder momentarily if you should give up bread altogether and go gluten-free just so you can leave this section of the store. 2, act surprised when the person you know says hello as if you weren't aware of their presence since they started down the aisle. 3, make awkward small talk. Ask what they're doing at the grocery store. Immediately feel like an idiot. Start volunteering unnecessary information about what you're eating for dinner. Feel obligated to invite them over. Immediately regret this choice. Be thankful when they politely decline. Worry that they secretly hate you. 4, say goodbye and part ways. When they round the corner, exhale a huge sigh of relief. 5, forget to grab a loaf of bread. 6, 5 minutes later, run into the person in another aisle. Make an awkward joke and say something like, "Fancy seeing you here." Immediately hate yourself. Quickly walk away as if you suddenly remember that you urgently need to find baking soda. 7, when you see the person again leaning close to the display as if it's absolutely crucial that you make the right choice between medium and sharp cheddar cheese. Pretend not to see the person walk right past you. Worry they think you're awkward and have no social skills. Worry that you are awkward with no social skills. Forget to pick a cheese. 8, decide to abandon the shopping trip to avoid running into the person again, but rather than serpentining through the store to put everything away, head straight for the register. 9, swear internally when the person you know stands behind you in line. Overcompensate for your inner monologue by greeting the person too effusively. Feel certain the checkout clerk is judging you. 10, start to behave like a normal person as the clerk rings up your groceries and the person behind you starts chatting. Feel like you're conversing like a regular human. 11, momentarily forget your PIN after you swipe your debit card. I hope no one notices. 12, collect your bags as the person asks you another question. Answer the question as they start their transaction. Finish replying just as the person is paying for their groceries. Worry about whether or not you should wait for them and walk out to the parking lot together. Worry that you seem clingy for waiting. Worry about seeming rude if you leave. Ultimately end up waiting out of immobilizing uncertainty. 13, wait for the person to pick up their bags. Wonder if you should offer to help carry their bags because they have more than you. Wonder if that's creepy. Wonder if you're creepy. 14, say goodbye just outside the grocery store's front door. Feel a small surge of excitement that this is almost over. 15, realize you're parked near each other. Walk in awkward silence because you've already said goodbye. Say something trite and banal about the weather. Immediately hate yourself. 16, say goodbye for real when you reach your cars. Busy yourself with loading your bags in your car to avoid any further eye contact. Become fascinated with the bag arrangement in your trunk. Wonder if there's enough space in the trunk for you to hide in until the other person leaves. 17, grin and wave as the other person drives by, your fourth goodbye in 20 minutes. Worry that your grin is too fake. Worry that you don't know how to smile without looking like a serial killer. 18, get in your car. Bang your head against the steering wheel until the shame subsides. Thank you. And if anyone's interested, I do have a few copies for sale with me, so come see me later. Thank you.